So good evening. My name is Ann Townsend, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's reading by the poets Erin Belieu and Cate Marvin. This reading is sponsored by the Endowed Fund of the family of Harriet Ewins Beck. For over 50 years, 30 of which I appear to have been at Denison, this endowment has brought some of the best writers in the world to campus for readings and residencies. I'm blessed with colleagues like David Baker, Margot Singer, Mike Crowley, Peter Granbois, Jack Schuler, Melissa Falavino, and Jen Leonard, who make this series run as well as it does, and who make teaching creative writing at Denison the joy that it is for me. So look for the posters announcing the final Beck Series reading this semester. On November 9th, we will hear the work of our newest colleague, nonfiction writer Melissa Falavino. But tonight, we're here for poetry. Erin Belieu and Cate Marvin are two writers I've been privileged to know for a lot of years now. I'm not even sure quite. 100. Not for Erin. It's more like, oh yes, of course it's 22. Of course, it's no time at all. So the thing to know about these two poets is that they are not only remarkable poets, they're also two women whose passion, clarity, and advocacy on behalf of equity in the writing world has altered and continues to influence America's contemporary literary landscape. In 2009, Cate and Erin and I co-founded the national literary nonprofit organization VIDA, Women in Literary Arts. From 2009 to 2015, Cate, Erin, and I organized and rallied writers across the country to ask hard questions about diversity in literary publishing. And if you're interested in hearing more about this, by the way, Erin, Cate, and I will be talking tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock in Barney Davis 215, 2 doors down from here. And you should feel free to join us. We're going to be talking about literary activism and how one does that. So Erin and Cate, over the years, have done extraordinary work, both as poets and as thought leaders in the national conversation about the state of literary publishing. And I was thinking about all of this as I was writing my introduction this morning. And I was reminded that before any of us were born, on November 1st, 1946, the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre participated in the very first conference that celebrated the founding of UNESCO. In his talk, which was called The Responsibility of the Writer, he says that an author writes in order to receive recognition. But he didn't mean our modern sense of recognition. That is what we think of as fame. As he puts it, he says, I think the writer speaks in order to be recognized by others in the sense in which Hegel talks about the mutual recognition of one consciousness by another. He's talking about a deep and abiding connection, that mutual recognition of one consciousness by another means the way that we come to love a writer because of language, because of the stories the writer chooses to tell by some magic or alchemy. When we read a writer we love, we recognize the writer. And perhaps that writer's words allow us, in turn, to recognize ourselves. That's the gift that books have to give us. And that's the gift you're about to hear. At the end of the reading, we'll have copies of Erin's and Kate's books for sale, right back there in the corner. So after the reading, please stay, talk, gather, eat all those cookies and brownies that otherwise will not be eaten except by me. So really, I want you to eat them. And enjoy the presence of these remarkable writers. I'm really proud to welcome them to Denison tonight. So they're going to read in turn. Erin Belieu will read first, and Cate Marvin will read second. And what I'll do as quasi-MC is say a few words about each writer before they read. One thing to know is that in a lot of literary introductions, the person who introduces might spend a few minutes talking about how many books the writer has published, how many prizes the writer has won, where the writer teaches or lives, or etc. I'm not going to do that. Google it. Instead, I'm going to talk about Erin for a minute. And when once Erin reads, I'll do the same thing when I introduce Cate. So this is one thing to know about Erin Belieu. Love and death are at the heart of Erin's work. Her poems complicate our human desire for connection with an acute awareness of the ways we hurt each other. The endless energy and exuberance of her works means her poems burst off the page. They're like little, you know those pop rocks that you used to throw on the ground and they go. Sometimes when I read her poems, that's what it feels like to me, inside my head. Little tiny explosions that mean I know something more than I did before I read that poem. Her poems make me laugh out loud at their wit and energy, and they make me stop in surprise at moments of perception so clear they ring like a bell. She gives us the dangerously ridiculous, as well as the wise and ancient sublime, while all along her poems remain absolutely and thoroughly human. If you would, please welcome Erin Belieu.
Did I make it go? Mm-hmm. Make it go. That was so much nicer than just a list of my stuff. And thank you for making me feel like a pop rock star, I might say. Thank you all for coming. And thank you to Denison and Townsend and all the people here who made us so welcome and spoiled us rotten with delicious food and drinks. So thank you for that. I thought I would just read, I'm not going to tax you too much. I'll just read a few poems tonight. I thought I'd start with, I'm going to read around in two different books. This was the second to last book called Slant 6. And the most recent book that came out last year is called, oh shit, I lost my marker, is called Come-Hither Honeycomb. And honestly, I'm going to start with Slant 6 because it's a lot more cheerful, and then woo you into my sadness, which is what poets do. But thank you very much, Anne, for hosting us. This is a poem I thought to read tonight because there's a thing that you might be interested in called motion poems. And motion poems are like, apparently directors have a lot of downtime. And so between films, they started this organization that turns poems into movies. And I was really lucky to have my poem chosen one time to do that. But now it just won some prize that I was alerted to the other day, and now the Poetry Foundation is going to be featuring these poems that have been selected. So this is a poem called When at a Certain Party in New York City. And it was turned into an animated short film. So I encourage you to Google it because it's just utterly charming and delightful. So this is the poem, When at a Certain Party in New York City. Wherever you're from sucks, and wherever you grew up sucks. And everyone here lives in a converted chocolate factory or deconsecrated church without an ugly lamp or souvenir coffee cup in sight, but only carefully edited objets like the Lacanian soap dispenser in the kitchen that looks like an industrial age dildo. And when you rifle through the bathroom looking for a spare tampon, you discover that even their toothpaste is somehow more desirable than yours. And later you go with a world-famous critic to eat a plate of sushi prepared by a world-famous chef from Sweden. And the roll is conceived to look like a strand of pearls around a white throat. And is so confusingly beautiful that it makes itself impossible to eat. And your friend back home, who says the pioneers who first settled the great asphalt parking lot of our middle were not in fact heroic, but really the chubby ones who lacked the imagination to go all the way to California. It could be that she's onto something. Because, admit it, when you look at the people on these streets, the razor blade women with their strategic bones, and the men wearing Amish pants with interesting zippers, it's pretty clear that you will never cut it anywhere that constitutes a wear. That even ordering a pint of tuna salad in a deli is an illustrative exercise in self-doubt. So when you see the dogs on the high-rise elevators practically tweaking, panting all the way down from the 19th floor to the first, dying to get on with their long-planned business of snuffling trash or peeing on something to which all day they've been looking forward, what you want is to be on the fastest Conestoga home, where the other losers live, and where the tasteless azaleas are, as we speak, half-heartedly exploding. One of the things I love about that poem is that people from New York think it's like ripping on Midwesterners, and people from the Midwest know that it's actually ripping on New Yorkers. So it goes both directions, it turns out.
But it is ripping on New York.
I think it's both. I honestly think it's both. I thought I would read a poem that I haven't thought about for a long time. I actually went to, one of my graduate degrees is from Ohio State University. And while I was there, I fell madly, stupidly in love with a man. And it was one of those things where, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation where, you know, you're hanging out and everything's super intense and you spend all this time together and it keeps somehow not happening. And it just keeps not happening. And you're like, is it me? Like there's something happening, but why is it not happening? And that's what this is about, is being foolish. And I'm a little embarrassed because my son is here. So, okay. So I'll reveal a little more of my history. Shh, stop. But anyway, so this is a poem that takes place. Okay. This is a poem that takes place in Ohio, and it's called Olentangy River. Oh, and it starts with a little bit of an insult, but I don't actually mean it. It was just a little cheap. So, Olentangy River. Hardest day ever in Ohio, and gray and coldest, as if there were another day in Ohio. As if the sun that spelled briefly where we walked for hours freezing were a magic as I needed it to be. Gollum's proof and Yenta's blessing to those many nights of driving past your house, inexorable, self-embarrassed, fuller than an itch, something better than this, sore those nights, not knowing where exactly, but inevitable, and clearly set on a direction, that place where I was driving because, of course, there was you somewhere sleeping or toasting bread or staring tired at TV, and ending lost, always lost. Still, you've never been imagined as I imagined you. Today with a wife sleeping in Ohio and babies down the hall, not ever so reached for. What did you do there by the Olentangy, once called stone for its knife, and therefore my soul caught at the place which is fitting, wedded as I was and sudden in Ohio, where objects are steep to climb and wrong. But you, walking with your Herbert, this gift, a little nothing, what you offered on my shelf now, hand whitening in the freezing, and you ungloved. And there, your voice always, where we are walking, will always be walking by the Olentangy, freezing. Oh, I love that guy so much. It really did. It didn't work out. Yeah, okay, so maybe how much time? Okay. Don't want to overstay my welcome. I think I'll read some poems from this more recent book. This is a poem. One of the things that I was interested in this book because, a lot of my previous books explore the first person poem quite a bit. And I became really interested in characters in this book and sort of the way you sort of free yourself from the self by inhabiting characters and just like trying to build characters in the poems. So I have a series of poems. Some of them will be in the next book, but this was the only one I thought was sort of ready for this. And this is a poem written in the voice of a teenage boy. I'm trying to think if there's anything you need to know. Right, so this is a poem called When I Am a Teenage Boy. I am like my parents' house, in a state of constant remodel we can ill afford, the noise behind a tarp producing little more than dust. But the footprint must change despite great expense. Large parts need to move for the sake of flow. I learned the trick is to appear intact, though recently the problem of my torso is introduced. My mother says I've always been a little Jew around the waist. She had specific hopes, shelled out for the stag tuxedo suit, sent me for cotillion lessons. Mind like a boardwalk jewelry store, heyday 1962, she wears her hostess gown in the kitchen while I creak along with the crock pot, pulverizing our Sunday stew. Because I'm an only, she put a TV in my room for company. It's a solid business taping cable porn to VHS. But when I'm caught extorting the gym coach, meds are discussed at school. My mother says we don't do meds, my dad and me, and I'm not caught often. Who would I be without this brain that twitches like the dragonflies I hose from the pool's filter? Instead, I take myself in hand. I buy a trench with birthday money sent by a childless aunt we thought dead years ago. We don't use the word lesbian because my mother says, who says that sort of thing? I perform my coat darkly in a graveyard split by an interstate where our housekeeper's son is housed. Here I feel most vivid, futurely, Peter Parker praying for his spider. Oh, I am replete with plans. I'll be like that prince in the novel I didn't read for English class. I don't finish books, but I get the gist. Some sad lady who offs herself by train, ballrooms, a bunch of Russians suffering, blah, blah. But that guy, Steva, eating his sausages. Someday I'll have a faithful servant too, or at least a wife. I fear I'll always be a little piggy in the middle, but that grease I'll lick from my fingers, it tastes like everything now. Sorry, that was kind of a salty poem. She's a very unpleasant lady, as you may have noticed in the poem. How much time do you have left? I mean, be honest, how much time do I have left? Like 5 minutes? Like an hour?
3 hours.
3 hours later. I think I'll just go ahead and finish up with this poem. It's a little bit longer, but only longer on a poetry scale. And this is actually a poem for Jude. Is there anything you need to know about this poem? I'm kind of proud of the fact that it has a cassowary in it. You're getting the most for your poetry dollar there because not every poem has a cassowary in it. Cassowaries are those really scary, like dinosaur birds that like kill more people.
My daughter studied that.
The ones that have the sex sound like a machine.
They're a killer bird. That's what they really are. They're a killer bird. And so that's what you need to know about them for this. But other than that, I don't think there's anything else to know. So this is a poem where the title reads into the poem. Please forgive me all that I have ruined, is what I wrote in a letter 4 years ago, and which, in retrospect, feels painfully ridiculous. The lyric flourishes absurd. Though it isn't like I didn't pony up for all my extra. I took that check for every meal, always ready to confuse the sum that someone wants from me with the balance of myself. My son and I, we've gotten good at being quiet after all those years of someone else's noise. Not unhappy quiet, but better than most at keeping still. It can feel willful at the holidays when half the time I'm left to herd the silence on my own. But mostly we ghost along contentedly through our dailiness. My son says he's convinced if we were predators, we'd dive more silently than barn owls, who are extremely silent, with feathers notched like steak knives that break the air to make them so. On other days, we are benign, slowly shifting from room to room, more stealthy than giraffes, whom scientists believe at most emit a non-committal hum, though their experiments can't entirely decide. Most often, drowning comes to us like this, so very quietly, while those dithering in the boil forget one decent option to consider: save yourself. Once, my son went under sneaky-like right behind my back when I was lifeguard for his tiny tuna pre-K class. Once he vanished absolutely inside a rack of discount dresses at a giant mall, pretending to hang there like an affordable floral print. He watched me call and call, my terror bursting skyward, all glassy spangle and screech, a one-woman fireworks display. And because he wasn't obviously damaged, I now take pleasure in the thought of him, invisible inside those dearly purchased minutes, loosed from the flaming dirigible of my fear, the red balloon unknotted from his wrist. Which is one kind of message sent by the universe, though typically uneasy to parse. Like the cassowary at Miami's Dumpy Zoo, unknown to us before as a thoroughly accomplished killer. Nature having furnished it with good-sized daggers on its middle toes, with which it's more than willing, when provoked, to unzip the human body like a duffel bag. And how its minders came to us before the aviary show, since we were closest to the stage, instructing us to hold completely still when they brought it out, to tuck in our feet and put our hands deep into our pockets. Really, they repeated, completely still. But how I envied it, that mindless dinosaur, caring for nothing but the little gobs of meal its trainer threw at the concrete stage to keep it occupied. How beautifully there, not there, the bird was, complete unto itself, a savage trick I recognize as having once perfected. The truth is, I've lost that gift. In my early dotage, my edge begins to bubble, creeping like the glass in a cathedral. I weep easily at stupid stuff. The truth is, my son only misses the dogs now. The one with eyes like ice in a glass on a bar top. The other unstoppable who ate a light bulb whole. Theirs was such a loving, faithful chaos. It was a thing of joy for us back then to watch them run. Thank you very much.
When I read Cate Marvin's poems, I sometimes feel slightly out of breath because of their headlong energy, their just absolute propulsion, the way they move through the world, open to the changes that time can bring. It's been such a pleasure to read each of Cate's succeeding collections as they've appeared. And more, I think, Cate's poems are growing fundamentally political and ethical. Her poems explore how language both represents and perpetuates violence, even if sometimes that violence is beautiful. Not only the violence we do to ourselves and to others, but to language itself. Cate's poems do what the best poems do. They help us ask questions. From Cate Marvin.
I'm gathering my stuff and heading up there. Please don't. Hi, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to read with Erin, a dear friend of mine and a poet who I so admire. In case you didn't hear how exquisitely crafted those poems are, it's really like, whoa. So, I was going to say like, oh, it's so hard to follow you, but it's actually a real pleasure to read with you and hear your poems. And Anne, it's always a pleasure. Anne Townsend is an amazing poet in her own right, just someone who is an exquisite craftsperson. So, yeah, and thank you, Dennison. This has been a real pleasure to be here. So, hi, everybody. I'm going to read. So basically, like the thing with writing, and you may have experienced this, like when you have old poems, you're kind of like, oh, yuck, those old poems. And I never read my older poems from previous books. So I decided to read a book from each of my first three, one each, and then I'll read a few from the book that I just published. So this is from a book called World's Tallest Disaster. And I think I'm going to go with, I don't even know how to introduce these because it's so strange to like look back at like yourself and like this past. But this one sort of jumped up out at me that I wrote when I was in my 20s. I was totally, this is a theme, right? I was like really in love with this guy who, obsessed might be the word, but I really like, he lived in Kansas. And so this poem was titled Kansas, and Kansas seemed like a very exotic place for me. So I'm going to start out with this poem that never sees the air. Like you won't be the only people who hear this poem ever. This is called Kansas. A hair in the throat, a lash in the eye. What a washing down, what a washing out. The tree sticks in my throat like a bone. The building sticks to my eye like an icicle to tongue. Your gate, iron wrought. Stairs trip me up them. Red brick bleeds on my hands, prints its touch with rust. The knob bends my fingers back. The door slams me in. To return to, an air tinged with blizzard. a still leaky tap clinking at a stack of dirty dishes. The red rug laps me at you, lulls me up your corridor. My hands are raw from wind. Your rings have sawed my fingers. Strange, I always thought if we were to again meet, it would be in paradise, shorn of skin, deboned, rinsed from our bodies. Our winter is done, the heart gnawed to none, yet it seems I must still watch you pick your teeth with its bone. You might have known I'd come home. My throat full of burrs, my eyes stuck with dust, all the washing down, all the washing out. Goodbye. I wanted to read this poem. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to read it. I'm going to read a couple poems from this one. So, anyone here from Cincinnati? No one's here from Cincinnati. Okay, no, never mind. This is a poem that is a little bit longer, and it is called Poem That Wears Your Scarf. There's drugs in this poem. Yeah. Poem That Wears Your Scarf. Knows my milky neck as I stand street-cornered, rivering one last look at you back toward my iris. Market bouquets jut fierce heads out the collars of their paper cones. Everywhere signs appall, fresh cut flowers, the violet blooms heralding dismay. I am moving towards you in this peopled square. Even at this distance, the two blue discs set in your head conduct their hypnosis, revolve like pinwheels, pale twins that spin me epileptic. My eyes, dark as wish coins, toss to fade slowly into the murk at a fountain's bottom. Your eyes so light they look lighter than ice, a pale closer to nothing than any iris I've seen. As the still clarity of a drink looks weak and yet is stronger than one might think, your eyes that did me in. It begins again with you, succulent darling, your mouth pressing so hard at mine our teeth clack. All kisses should be so onomatopoetic. All love should be loud enough to scare off the neighbors. We put the reds of our tongues to bed, tuck them deep in the jewelry boxes of our mouths. Falling from out the doorway hinge to a strange man's house to land on that peculiar glittering of asphalt at 5 a.m. A new sun so diamond and inexplicable, shuddering up brick walls. The taxi was waiting around the corner, but we didn't notice the corner. Why was it taking so long? We never sleep again. Days later, on a train heading south, your head falls, perches itself like a boulder on the sharp edge of my shoulder. I sneeze blood into a napkin. Did you know I liked how our bodies flinched? Your bed tight with ice covers, never a place for lovers. Your floors slick and fogged, set as still and hard as the face of an opaque lake. Branches outside clacking in wind, everywhere a glittering. The slow syrup of chilled vodka sliding its Arctic snake down my throat. How nights trembled, seal entrails wetting snow darkly, just clubbed while disco lights revolved all around us emptying drinks into our mouths as criminals shake stolen purses out, dump their contents into black sacks. How even the air there was muzzled. I loved being locked in the walk-in freezer of your apartment where you fed me pâté and Chardonnay, allowed me to watch you sleep. I love you, I told the wall. Moments before the streets will wrap their scarves around our necks and I will cast my stare out from the window set at the cab's back, avenues rivering opalescent behind us, and we step out, oily rainbows puddling round our boot heels. I am walking alone. I do not know your very pale eyes yet. Can I not sense my desire as I move languid beneath sun cast on the sidewalk for your brand of decadence? No. I will lie in your bed, watch as you peel an orange. I will allow my mouth to open, let in your fingers. I lose my hat, I lose my mittens, I lose my head. When the blizzard hits, all is white, and you stand me before a mirror, wind your scarf round my neck. Now I want to push this story down your throat. I see you cornered on a street corner. I approach. So I wanted that poem to kind of start like wrap around, you know? It's a weird poem. So okay. I'm going to read you a poem. I think it's funny. And it's one of those things that some people don't think it's funny, right? So anyway, but it's also an example of, like we were talking in creative writing class, how sometimes it takes you a long time to write a poem you've wanted to write. A very, very long time. Sometimes it won't pop up for like, I don't know, 10 or 20 years. So this poem is called Yellow Rubber Gloves. I always wanted to write a poem called Yellow Rubber Gloves. And who here uses yellow rubber gloves to wash dishes? Anyone?
Mine are purple.
It's funny because the poems I'm reading they're kind of like different. They're different from each other, right? Like I'm not really reading a set that like goes together. So you're just kind of seeing different phases, okay? So I think this is fucking hilarious. It's called Yellow Rubber Gloves. And so the idea is that it's in the voice of an older woman who's kind of talking to younger women, okay? Sisters, why bother? The telling is done. I once fancied myself centaur, sweeping floors with my tail as my arms sunk deep into dishwater. Half lost, indeed, looking almost as if they'd been clean lopped off. Mopping up all that blood, rusty strings on the mop dragging their fat hairs along the linoleum. I'm never surprised when someone calls me lady. They may as well call me a cleaning lady, though I know they mean lady, as in, what the hell do you think you're doing, lady? I am merely washing dishes. Yours. It makes me want to give in, adopt those dozen cats, makes me nervous enough to count how many cigarettes I've got left. I've seen the lines inching across my face. I'm wise enough to know no great plans are afoot. I have no hope of launching any ships, and besides, I'm done with beauty. They say the hands go first, then the eyes. Then you get a little pinched, whiskery around the lips. I'm not averse to invisibility. I'm already used to getting shoved aside anyway, sitting small as a pin between men spreading their legs on packed subways. I'm the blunt cunt who should have known long ago it's about time I shut my fucking hole. But bring my hands deep into suds, watch me muck with the dirt of men's dishes, you'll see I really know what I'm doing. My advice, yellow rubber gloves will save your hands, young bitches, awful twats who think you'll never be me. Trust me as I never trusted myself. We're in this together. Look at your hands. Who else did you think he had in mind, undermining your time by leaving dirty dish after dirty dish behind? And try using a milder solution. It may bubble up less, but being less caustic, the fewer skin cells it destroys. Also, lotion is important. Apply it just after washing dishes and every night before you go to bed. Who do you sleep beside? So, I'm going to read 3 from here. I hope I'm not going too long. So this is my new book, Event Horizon, and I'm going to read a poem, and I'm going to dedicate this poem to Erin Belieu. Because we did a lot of work together. It's not the sentimental thing. You're going to crack up. So it's called War on Fun. And it's about this sort of nefarious person who we both knew.
Can't wait to figure out who it is.
Yeah. And so it's called War on Fun. And so there's 3 more poems, okay? None of them are very long. War on Fun. In a deceitful time with a deceitful friend, I stayed at sea for days called sea days, on a vessel with casinos for hallways, as triumphant waves licked the ship's sides in blackest night, and luscious wet bodies leapt the smack balls over nets on the pool deck. It was my birthday, and poor cell phone service disguised the lack of a call or text from a man I longed back then to call my boyfriend. I drank in Dazzles, a lounge like a theater that morphed from dance party to game show within an hour, ordering double whiskeys by the dozens, the bill accruing invisibly, almost like a portent, a receipt unspooling into the fathoms of a sky that seemed to move its length like a giant cat alongside the wind and water, whipping up at me from the deck side, where I stood smoking one cigarette after another. My dreadful friend, latent back then like a disease, claimed seasickness, chewed on Dramamine, cluttered our berth with products designed to make her privates hygienic, worthy, chemical, or, as she said, because she was so sensitive down there. You've got to get, what is that stuff called? Summer's Eve? The only reason I was on that ship was due to a conflict between her and her rehab friend, who cut her off after the fatal discovery of stolen pills. This friend had booked the trip for her birthday, and my birthday happened to be one day after. The all-cost-paid trip was a mere $400, so I thought I may as well experience it. The lower-level art gallery with art so ugly, it stood in direct opposition to notions of art. And what I was doing there was due to my being in a weak position. I was lonely. The purpose of the journey, it soon became apparent, was to experience fun, which was doled out in many formulas and flavors, none of which agreed with me. It was, I saw, a metaphor for the life I had not yet lived, and avert at every corner. I turn. A friend whose sleep is malicious, who concocts tales of having once seen a ghost in your attic, who is described unremarkably as donned in a long white nightgown, a candlestick clutched in her hands, her hair wild and white. Was that me wandering my attic just above my own head? I'm not the medium. I have no funnel to prop open to the essence of the other world. I fail to distinguish between a friend who is devoted to me and the friend now approaching as I stand by the railing, smoking, pouring myself into the task of regarding the voluminous carpet of the sea, her hand gentle at my back. On those sea days and nights, how she smiled, as she smiled at me often, watching me trip and tasting my shoe on the step in the back of her throat. Now that I have experienced so much intentional fun, I have given up on fun. Now that this venal friend has made her apology years later, I do not accept. I do not accept fun, the fun that is for liars, peering down and over the ship's side from which hundreds of lifeboats hung. So I'm gonna read you a couple poems that are about my child. I have one too. My kid is 13. And this is a poem about when they were really little, right? It's called It's a Limousine. I saw the hugest limousine at this hotel yesterday. It was so long. It was having such a problem turning. You know, it's like I hate them so much. Okay, it's a limousine. It is nothing like a shark, but the monogram. Let me start over, okay? Yeah, thanks. Okay. It's a limousine. It is nothing like a shark, but the monochromed, blanched off-white of its long body is dumb like a shark's nose and dead eyes, and it is turning a corner. There's always a child in awe who asks, "What is that?" And we must supply the information, however embarrassing our world may be, in the explanation. For example, this dumb automobile that will make me one day explain prom, which made me personally throw up in a parking lot. Or wealth, that one is difficult, because the sparkling, wide-eyed young ones all want all the money and candy, and most especially baby kittens the size of gumdrops that will never grow up. For them, our world is a cotton candy haze, except when you accidentally mention a dead cat who was named Peanut. Then the storm appears on the brow, looms like charred coffee at the depths of a cup. And why shouldn't we give that man bent on the corner money? Because we don't have much money, honey. What's that? A man who drives a very nice car and is just about to hit you. You must remind these little dum-dums. They are very small. No one can see them. Anyone is liable to run them over. No one cares about what grade they're in. They must stop touching everything. They can't have cake, popcorn, popsicles, cupcakes for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. It's a limousine, and it represents every stupidity known to humankind. And you, my child, are never allowed to ride in one. May they one day become obsolete. May spaceships replace them. May you one day cease to force me to answer all of your questions about this awful world again. Though by then, I may be dead. And for now, I'll take grabbing your hand in mine while crossing this fearsome parking lot as my one true reason to live. So there's a lot of topics covered in, these books. So what I had to do, my kid, this book took about 7 years to write. And I always wanted to be one of those poets who wrote a book every 5 years, but no. Erin's was like 3 laps ahead of me. She's already finished her next book. I know it. Okay, I'm serious, friends. Okay, so my kid is trans, non-binary, and I had them as a daughter for a lot of my book, right? So I was like, okay, I can't, it was going to be really difficult to go back in and rework the poem. So my last poem in this book was very important for me to transition them. And it's a mix of things. It's not just about that. Just like I think any good poem is not just about one thing, but it's partly about some of my experience. And it's in 3 parts. So it's okay. And it's called They, Them, Theirarchy. Okay. Thank you, Ian. Thank you. Well, I think we're doing a Q&A, right? I hope so. I don't know. Maybe you guys want to get out of here. But so They, Them, Theirarchy. So 3 parts. 1. It didn't matter that my daughter turned into a sun and then back again into a flame and cut their hair off and flew up into the sky with a burst of feathers I'd used to dust away the cobwebs. Or that I'd taken to dressing as the battered women's hotline, that my stalker was trying to pretend we'd never stood before that judge in Essex County who stated, "There's no reason you ever need to talk to her again," instead writing me an email as if we had remained friends. Or that the woman who ran the session on domestic abuse said, "It only takes a minute of stopping oxygen from getting to the brain to cause brain damage." Gestures, her hands grabbing at her throat on the Zoom screen. I too have been strangled. Women's faces collect in rows of chocolate box squares on my laptop. Each one may as well be me. We look back at one another. Trying to get that Zoom sensibility, when you have that tray of faces. 2, I was curled up inside my own daughter, waiting for her to ask for a razor. She was getting to be that age. Her fingernails were long and elegant as spoons, not gnawed like mine. Her teeth I love a lot, yellow ivory tablets behind plush lips. She'd inherited the nostrils of my grandmother. They were tiny and imperious as those of a hippopotamus. In fact, the one prayer I'd made for her was for her to not end up with this particular nose. But when I saw it on her, I saw she pulled it off. It was bitterly, cruelly cute. A challenge because if her nose was stuffy, folks could see right up it. She was not a feminine daughter either, which suited me better. She'd sliced the ice skates right off her ankles and refused to dance. Her hands, however, were almost unnaturally feminine, their digits slender, nails tapered. It's the hands that will give them away. 3. My daughter is gone. She snuffed her name. It meant light. I spent months thinking it up. When they were 4, the man I was with told me he thought my kid had a bad streak. This coming from a blackout drunk who spent his days looking out from his second-story window, chain smoking, casting terrible stares down at me whenever I pulled into the driveway. They can't remember any of this, nor the day I scooped them up into my arms, put them in the car, and we drove away. Perhaps it feels this way to them, like they are driving away from something dangerous, their name. A name becomes one's face. Sliding the wand, the nurse said, I think it's a girl. Now women's faces collect like tears in a spoon. Who in their right mind wants to be poured in along with them? We don't keep enough mirrors in this house. They are more beautiful than they realize. Thank you.